Welcome to our viewers around the globe. We are joined from Israel today by Noam Bedein, who is the head of a fascinating NGO called the Dead Sea Revival Project. Welcome, Noam. Please begin by telling us what your role is at the NGO and how you got involved with it.
Okay, so I am the founder and director of the Dead Sea Revival Project. It's basically the only nonprofit organization dealing specifically with the Dead Sea cause, when our purpose is to share the Dead Sea story, the Dead Sea cause, to the world through any venues as possible, through documentation, through education, through research, through environmental art, through ecotourism, through regional cooperation, any way as possible to connect the lowest place on earth to the world is our purpose. How I got the part to be doing this kind of work, actually my background is being a war photographer, many years living on the Gaza border, documenting the human drama, living under rocket fire. And I shift myself from the human drama to the environmental drama. And of course, the Dead Sea being a unique kind of a place we actually have in Israel and in the world. Many people are drawn to this mysterious and one-of-a-kind enchanted place. And the way I explore the Dead Sea like never seen before is actually going on a boat to explore the shores in the northern part of the Dead Sea that have never been open to the public. There's no actually way to access these shores. And that's how basically my eyes were opened up for the first time, seeing this world wonder from up close. And the more I started doing this boat ride, the more I've been seeing the water receding level, which is right now in the lowest in recorded history. And eventually, to explain to people why is the Dead Sea receding right now in the lowest recorded history is mainly because the historical flow has been dried out. The connection of the Dead Sea to the Jordan River, to the Sea of Galilee, that's the main story over here, connecting this water treasure to the other water treasures of Israel. And therefore, you cannot talk about the Dead Sea if you do not talk about the Sea of Galilee, what we call the Kinneret and the Jordan River. And therefore became a much more wider kind of concept of understanding what the Dead Sea today is standing for. And eventually, we actually get to the point how the Dead Sea is actually a regional problem of the Middle East in terms of water supply, because the Dead Sea needs enormous amounts of water, up to 750 million cubic of water. What's that number actually means? Well, first of all, just to explain, we're losing per day, around 600 Olympic pools are emptied every single day in the Dead Sea. That's around a meter and a half, around five and a half feet drop every single year. A tremendous dramatic impact to the entire region, causing over 6,000 sinkholes in total of the entire region. Where the earth actually opens up, and therefore there's almost no access today to the northern Dead Sea. And the reason this is actually happening, like we said before, is because the historical flow has been dried out. And making a long story short, the Dead Sea needs enormous amounts of water to save it, to preserve it in the same kind of level. And that enormous amount of water, technically, that could also be used for a starving population that actually needs water, like Jordan, the kingdom of Jordan on the other side of the Dead Sea. Jordan is considered one of the driest countries in the world today. And therefore, you get to this moral dilemma. What comes first? If it's providing enormous amounts of water for a population that is thirsty, or do you take this water in order to preserve a water treasure? And of course, there's no debate here, because the most basic human right is to providing water for drinking purposes. And therefore, the solution for the Dead Sea on a long run is very complex, very deep. But we try to do what we can today to tell the story of the Dead Sea, presenting Israel through those lens of the Dead Sea, because it's such a unique kind of place. When I say unique, meaning it's not only one of the saltiest bodies on earth, one of the deepest lakes also on earth as well. It contains over 26 types of minerals. Half of these minerals are only found in the Dead Sea, minerals that the human body contains today, actually providing minerals throughout the entire agriculture world, actually feeding people around the world. And the more I've been exploring the Dead Sea for the past 5 years, the more I've been seeing how much life is appearing outside of the Dead Sea. So it's interesting that we call the Dead Sea. There's nothing but life coming out, appearing from the Dead Sea. And that's part of the historical, biblical aspect of the Dead Sea, talking about prophecies of the Dead Sea, when the year to become, how there's actually freshwater springs underneath the Dead Sea and also in the sinkholes. There's actually fish on the outside of the Dead Sea. We even have NASA recognition, NASA recognizing our work, showing that there's actually living microorganisms in the salty water, which can be actually a huge significant aspect for many other water treasures around the world. A lot to get into about the Dead Sea itself. The contributions to the decline of the water is, again, so first of all, you have the industry and the factories that pump out the water for using the minerals to export around the world. Most of the focus usually of the green parties and the media is usually on the industry, on the factories. It's a very easy thing to be putting the finger to point at, but that's only 30 to 25% of the problem, not the main story, not the main problem. And therefore, being the only organization dealing with the Dead Sea cause, we have to be looking into the future and dealing with the roots of the problem, which is basically looking up north, restoring the historical flow, restoring the other water bodies and connecting all those together in order to have a long stability for the Dead Sea on the long run. So there have been different kind of solutions up until today for the Dead Sea, 6 different governmental solutions to provide fresh water for the Dead Sea. The most tangible solution actually by the government was a regional cooperation with Jordan and the World Bank. It was called the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, the Dead Sea Red Sea Canal. This has been on the table for the past over 30 years. And recently, in recent months, it's actually completely off the table today. This was one of the major projects of the region. The World Bank promised $10 billion for this project because they saw this project as a symbol of cooperation in the Middle East. More interesting than that, it's actually, the plan was building the largest desalination plant in the world in the Red Sea. And only that kind of technology of desalination and that kind of level is an enormous opportunity for the entire region, which is lacking of water today. That's why, again, the more we expose the Dead Sea story, the more we're encouraging the entire Middle East to be promoting a regional alliance for water sustainability. And to be honest, right now, there is no solution for the Dead Sea, unfortunately. And that's why we've taken upon ourselves to be advocating in any ways possible, getting the story out in order to advocate for the true and for the natural solution of restoring the historical flow of the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, having the water flourishing naturally to the Dead Sea on the long run, building regional cooperation with our new neighbors since the Abraham Accords, which was one of the most exciting things we've been experiencing this past year. I've personally been developing relationships with the UAE, United Arab Emirates. Both of the countries, UAE and Israel, are the leading countries in the world today for water technologies, water solutions. And this cooperation we've been building up in order to learn from one another and building up relationships around this value of water sustainability. We're hoping it to become a model case and an inspiration for the entire region and for the entire world. And because the Dead Sea is a very deep lake, scientists are saying, oh yeah, and by the year 2050, there'll remain only a small pool. There'll be remaining only a small pool of salt. But to explain that even today, even now, there's almost no access to the Northern Dead Sea. And those of us actually listening to us, whoever visited Israel recently, before the corona crisis, usually when they go to the Dead Sea for vacation or experiencing the Dead Sea, they go to the southern part of the Dead Sea where all the hotel district actually is. And to explain to the Israelis that this part of the Dead Sea is completely artificial. For the past 40 years, it has been literally disconnected from the northern part of the Dead Sea. Is part of what we're dealing with today is basic education to explain to people about the northern parts of the Dead Sea, the remaining Dead Sea we have today, And this is part of our challenge today. So our challenge at the moment, we have many other aspects and projects on the go. We're building a museum, an art museum of the Dead Sea to bring life back to the Dead Sea. And we urge people that have a love for Israel, have a love for the Dead Sea, this one-of-a-kind place, giving us a voice and face in order for us to keep on doing this kind of work, to getting the word out in any creative way as possible. We encourage people to visit our website and to contribute to our cause.
Noam, thank you so much. That was really fascinating, but it raises one question in my mind, because I overheard this recently. Jordan had been a partner in the Red Sea to the Dead Sea project. What made them pull out of it all of a sudden?
Well, to be honest, Israel has pulled out from it because it was not economically even worth for Israel. Israel does not need another source of water. And because all the tensions always happening between both countries, that's why things were never actually on a go. Small things that actually happen between the countries, people are forgetting that 70% of the Jordanian kingdom are Palestinian Arabs. And therefore, there's always tensions happening between the countries. Every small incident actually takes the whole project years back. And Israel has decided to not take part of it because the main project, the Dead Sea Canal, was not really for saving the Dead Sea, but it was a diplomatic project of providing water for Jordan. That's why the project is still on the go, but only for the Jordanian part, and it's not even going to go to the Dead Sea. Many people, many scientists and environmentalists were completely against this project because the water that was planned to be going into the Dead Sea was the brine water. What is the brine water? Is when the desalination process takes in the salt water, so parts of it turns into fresh, sweet, drinkable water. The other part, what we call the brine, which is the waste of the water, which is very, very salty, and that's the water they're planning to put into the Dead Sea. And everyone were claiming that this could be ruining the Dead Sea and that very unique balance you have with minerals in salt could be ruining the Dead Sea completely, and no way even to repair that. So it was not even a solution for the Dead Sea, but it is a first stage solution of providing our neighbors on the other side of the Dead Sea with fresh, sustainable water. For them to actually have a source of water is what they actually want and need. And technically, like we said, once they actually have water, then you start talking about looking up north and diplomatic kind of ties for them to be taking out their pumps from the Jordan River and then having Israel supplying more water to the Sea of Galilee by building more desalination plants in the northern part of Israel, filling up the Kinneret, filling up the Sea of Galilee, opening up the dams, having water flourishing through the Jordan River, going through the most natural kind of way, reaching the Dead Sea. That's the ultimate and most natural solution today.
Well, it certainly sounds controversial, if nothing else, because you've got the environmentalists on one side and you've got King Abdullah on the other side and you've got who knows else involved.
Exactly.
And they all want their say. But in the long term, it certainly sounds like a potential solution if the World Bank would get behind it.
Right. But that's why we're dealing with governments, with regional politics. And like I said, being a simple person, being a nonprofit organization, focusing our efforts, our job is to get the word out and to spread the story in any ways possible. And we have been doing it. We've been getting coverage literally everywhere. I got recognition from National Geographic, from CNN. Almost any news broadcast, we've been using our material. I've been the only one to actually document the Dead Sea on a boat for the past 5 years. So I have very unique content that nobody actually has of presenting this world wonder from up close like never seen before.
And you do an absolutely fabulous job of presenting, if I might say so. Thank you so very much for joining us here at In the Know this morning, and I hope you enjoyed the results of this video when it is published. Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. All the best.